this is the beautiful Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. Somewhere that holds a little spot for me because at the Sonderpesh Fishing Club, I used to go there every year for something like 13 years, sometime between, usually end of January, start of February, catching or fishing for and catching the marlin. I didn't catch any of those, sailfish that is. This is something nearly a quarter of a century ago. This is an old vintage footage. The base of most of the big game fishing in Mauritius is down in the area called Black River, where there's a natural gap in the reef caused by the river. The fresh water in the river actually stops the coral barrier reef growing all the way round and sort of circulating right round the actual island. So it's a good access point. It's also good in Black River Bay for mooring all the boats. And they got, or used to have, so bear in mind this is almost 25 years old, they used to have all the big game boats there. Now some of these are really famous big game boats of their times. The old Flipper fleet, the old Hooker fleet, a lot of those, and the famous Flipper 7, that was a good one I used to like going on. And it's quite a buzz, it was quite an atmosphere. You generally get an early morning wake up call at 6 in the morning when it's just about, well, still dark really, and you'd be getting up and there'd be an absolute buzz of marlin fishing. It was a total centre for marlin fishing and shark fishing, obviously, because they're in the same area. It was a heavy tackle venue in the early days, and they used to use a lot of 80s and 130s because if they took out tourists there, a lot of the fish might get lost by, you know, if you're using inadequate tackle. So they tended to go, well, let's face it, they got, I don't know, probably over 20 fish. I think they've had over 1,000 pounds, maybe even more than that by now. But there's every chance of catching a 1,000 pound plus blue marlin, maybe even the rarer black marlin, and certainly sharks. Now you can see all the razzmatazz and goings on here. What you used to do is in the old hotel club when it was there many years ago, it was basically people would stay there for a holiday, but mostly it's just big game fishermen. And you would go out early in the morning and fish till about, say, back by about 4 in the afternoon. And I used to specialise in fishing for blue marlin with lures, and I probably did far too much of it. Now there you can see the gap in the barrier reef. In the mountains there, over the background, you'll see one come up on the right hand side of the screen called Le Morne. That's a big bump on the right hand side. Now Le Morne is the mark for the deep water in the southwest corner of the island. Once you go out there no more than maybe a mile, 2 miles, it really does drop off deep, and travelling out to Black River probably takes you about 20 minutes to get out there. But there's also hotels on that point right at the base of the mountain, luxury hotels, and they used to have these challenger boats, a fleet of challenger boats running out from there, and you'd be fishing literally within 5 minutes the marlin lures would be going out. Now you can see it's pretty basic. As I say, it's an old film. They had bamboo outriggers. They didn't have any aluminium ones. They had bamboo outriggers, and they had big stayed supports of lanyards of rope that they used to use to support those outriggers. And let's face it guys, highly successful they were too. Now I used to specialise in marlin fishing, but fast trolling with marlin lures, dragging them through the surface. Now they have to smoke, they have to leave a trail of bubbles like a big jet stream that you see across the sky. If they don't come up and pop on the surface, which is where they grab some air in the front face of it, then you won't get fish. Now here's one I had, a blue marlin, and this one's going to be brought in and eaten. I guess the fish was about a couple £100, something like that. They also use tag lines there, and you can also fish with bent butt rods, but be aware some of the harness systems they used to have there don't always cater for the bent butt system. The bent butt actually means you can apply more pressure for a given length of rod than you can with a straight butt, and it's more used with a bucket harness. So a wide variety in different types of harness systems and big heavy tackle systems, and I used to take over my own tackle then, because obviously the airlines at that stage were much more flexible for carrying gear, and I'd take anything up to 5 or 6 marlin rods over, 80 wide reels, 50 wide reels, and that's all I was going for, a 2-week holiday for marlin, and I guess I'd probably average 6 to 8 marlin landed on per trip I used to go over there. Always check the drag and put, pretty much heavy drag on the line, because you want the hooks to be driven in by the power of the boat going along. You don't actually strike the fish. And what you're looking for here are flocks of birds diving on bonito. The skipjack tuna are the mainstay species of the marlin. You can actually see them bust through the surface here in a minute, and there they are, just absolutely coming out. You catch those on small squids. You're trolling, well, not through them, but around the edges, and round and about there is absolutely where you've got the best chance of hooking a marlin. Now, once you've actually hooked up your skipjack tuna, you bring it in, the crewman brings it in, he turns it upside down to keep it calm, and he puts a crochet needle through the front of the eye sockets, not through the eye, draws out a lanyard or a loop of heavy dacron, and half hitches that around the shank at the end of the hook, and then you can drop it back in the water, and that fish will stay alive until it gets eaten or chopped in half by a barracuda or a wahoo or a shark. It will get eaten hopefully by a big marlin or a big shark. That fish can actually live all day long like that. And you can see now he's straightened up and he's pulling away, and the crewman feeds out the line. Generally you'd fish a pair of live baits, one from each outrigger, and you could put them on 80s, 80 wide if you want. And to increase the tension, because they'll pull at least a 10-pound tuna as well, they actually put bands around the mouth of the clip, the outrigger clip, and send it up to about 3/4 of its length, and then put a big drop back. They just free spool the line back from the rod top to the outrigger clip in a big drop back, and then just barely set the real drag so line can be taken off and you don't get a backlash, hopefully. The actual drop back method is a very, very old method that's used and is ideal, and here you can see him putting extra rubber bands around the outside of the nose of the clip. It's for his, usually when there's a strong live bait. Now here's an addition. This is showing you one of the deckhands. He's going to soak the mouth of a dead tuna. This is dead baiting on the surface. He's going to get some dacron and he sews through the front of the two jaws right down. You can't tow a fish through the water with the mouth open, because it's going to make it spin. It's going to put a lot of drag onto the outrigger clip if you're using outriggers, and it's probably going to pop the outrigger all the time. So you need to make it streamlined. And what he's doing here, he's just closing the mouth, closing the jaws by stitching it together. Now you can fish a bait like this, but what he's also going to do here to help close it up, he's sewing the gill covers shut so that they can't flare open. And again, if they do flare open, it means the bait's going to spin. And as all fishermen, or all predator fishermen, doesn't matter whether it's freshwater or sea, whatever, if it's spinning, they're generally not going to take it at all. It has to look as natural as possible. So what we would normally do is fish two live baits and fish a third centre line, what they call, some people call it a shotgun, down the middle between the two outriggers, and fish that with the dead bait. Now here he's stitching up the dorsal fin, because when a tuna is going through those schools of bait fish where you saw the birds in an earlier bit of footage I showed you, their fins will be up and their fins will be sticking out, obviously because that's how they rocket around grabbing and feeding on the fish. Now the marlin know this. They know that when the fins are up, that particular tuna is concentrating on catching bait, and obviously is a little bit unwary. It's concentrating on something that the marlin can get it from behind. So he's also sewing up the pectoral fins here. Bit of flicker in here, you can see it's a very old bit of footage, but I think it's still worth showing. But he sews up the pectoral fins as well. Same principle applies. If those fins are sticking up, it makes it look as natural as possible to a following marlin, or a marlin that's looking from deep down looking upwards. It's going to see the fins sticking out and is thinking, hang on, that tuna is chasing some bait fish, it's not looking where I'm coming from, and they grab it. Now the same principle applies here. They use a crochet needle, go through the front of the eye sockets, put a half hitch over the point of the hook, and then slide that half hitch down into the bend of the hook, and then they just flex it to take the rigor mortis out of the bait, so it's got a little bit of movement there. Now if you sew both fins up like this, it'll pull fairly straight, as it were, but if you want it to spiral off to one side, just sew up one pectoral fin and that'll make it swim to one side. And then you're only travelling, in complete contrast to the lure fishing, where I'll be travelling at maybe 8 knots, something like that, and then maybe 9 knots. With live bait fishing, you're only going 1.5 knots. As you can see the wake of the bubbles of the boats, It's barely moving along, and it's just enough. It's ideal for this dead bait here. As you can see, it just twists and rolls and flashes, and it's close in, so there's every chance. And again, you fish this on the centre line, maybe rigging up to the chair, and I've seen fish to over 500 pounds caught like this, really right behind the boat. They come absolutely past the live baits to get these fish. The main thing is to get that harness on as soon as you can. At this stage, when you hook a big marlin up, there's absolutely nothing you can do. The boat's motoring along, trying to keep the line tight, and that gives you those vital seconds, because you don't want any slack line, especially with lure fishing, because those hooks might fall out, and you want to get clipped up to the shoulder harness or the fullback harness so you can start cranking on the fish. Once it slows, you know, you've got the reel on strike drag, you might have to go up, you might have to go back if you start losing line. You can also add a little bit of finger pressure to it, as I'm doing on the front of the spool there. You can just pinch it just to slow it, but let's face it, they're blue marlin, you're not going to slow too much there. Once they crank off, it's just a question of waiting. Like all big game fishing, it's not rocket science, it's patience, it's physical, and I like to treat it really as a sort of a workout, almost like an endurance test it is really. Now here I'm using a curved butt rod, but I've had to use just a standard shoulder harness, which is not the real thing to do with this. But what I'm doing is trying to get 1 or 2 crank turns. That's all I'm trying to get on a single speed Shimano, I think that's an 80 wide reel. So what I want to do is just get single turn pumps. Don't go mad trying to, you know, get 4 or 5 on there. And if you can get the boat with any sort of reverse, they rarely find reverse in Mauritius too fast. I mean, in contrast, a lot of places get it too quick and you lose line quickly.
Just working out, it's going to jump now, it's not going to jump, the line's very shallow. It's going again, please. Set a looser line first. Okay.
Don't be afraid to get right up out of the chair and put your body right over the top of the foot plate. You actually so your entire body's out of the chair. Crank down 2 or 3 turns, you know, get as much pressure on the fish and keep tight to it. The main thing with lure fishing is you want to hold the hooks in. You cannot afford to be complacent. And once the fish is close to the boat, your job's over. You can only bring the swivel about 4 inches from the rod top. Then it's up to the crewman or the decky to reach out, grab the leader, and here comes a fish. It's a blue marlin. I think it was my 100th marlin back in those days.
100. I don't care if it's this big, it's not 100. You see from fish this size, is they still take a small lure. But what I found by rigging the lures the way I do with these double hook rigs is, here is very hard, the top, but the bottom you can, I don't know whether you can see that, here is soft. That's going to be probably your best hooking spot, albeit this one came in up the top, went in and came out at the top. So I try and rig it so the trailing hook, this is bent out position now, the trailing hook is as far back as possible. This fish will take a small lure, but I think they're aggressive on these big LNG ones. This is a Murray Brothers pink. This is the best colour I use in Mauritius. Not a big fish, this one maybe 160 perhaps, something like that, 180. But what you find in Mauritius is they bring all the fish in. Now you can tag and release if you want. What we're going to do is, now we've lucked out getting this one. We had another one earlier, 200. What we're going to do is try and get Nigel one. Nigel's not had one before, so he's perfectly entitled to bring one in. It's his first fish. All the fish in Mauritius are eating as food, so there's no problem. They saw their head up, they eat the bill, the guts, the tail, everything. Got the spread out again. We've got an extra line out today because it's a little bit flat, the sea. It's a nice little bit of ripple on it. We could come in with something here if we're lucky. Obviously we're pleased to get that fish. What we've got right at the back, we've got 2 LNG1, the Murray Brothers light and glow lures. We've got a black and purple on the right, and we've got a pink on the left, and I've got two boom birds rigged permanently on the line, on the leader, crimps of the leader in fact, just in front. So there's a lot of action back there. We've had some good strikes on that. Then moving into the centre, we've got a centre line which I always fish here. Just running just right. Then I've got two flat lines in closer, but they're not particularly close. I've pushed them back quite a bit. A little bit closer than I would normally run them in a rough weather condition. But I see across here the sea's pretty flat. There's a nice ripple just coming in. It's looking really good for lure fishing. I've got LNGs on there, smaller sized one. Because of the flat conditions, what I've done is change them since we had that last fish. Because the fish that took the LNG was on a pusher lure. I've got one on a stand-up 50 and we've got one on a straight bar 80. The other thing I've put out as a bonus now, because we might pick another fish up very tight on the inside, I've got my curved butt 50 and I'm running a 7-strand pusher lure very, very tight to the boat. So we're going to see what happens here anyway, and after that fish we've radioed the other boat saying I've had a couple of strikes but they're not stayed hooked up, they both come unbucked.
In the next second, so after doing that little talk on the flying bridge, where we go, Nigel's in. It's his first marlin, so I'd not only had my 100th marlin, but also managed to get Nigel hooked up to his first, so that was quite something. Same rod, same lure, same place, 20 minutes later.
It's most important when you're fighting a marlin. It's a heavy fish. Don't let yourself get bent over. You do not want to be bent over with your back hunched really too far down. So always straighten up, and as you straighten up, use the pull on the harness to actually lever the rod up towards you. As you can see here, Nigel's not actually using his forearm to pull on the foregrip or the front of the rod. You're basically using the whole of the harness trying to lever that rod up. Now they're big game rods. An 80 barely bends, and a 130 I don't even think you can hardly get a bend in it at all. Some of them now, they do make a sort of nice fine tip to a 130, but nevertheless you need to keep pressure on the rod because there's not a lot of spring or give. And how about this for your first fish? Blue marlin, I think the fish was around about 200 pounds, and it's going in for dinner. Of the two species of marlin, the blue is actually the better eating, and they do smoke it over there, and smoked marlin is absolutely beautiful. The black marlin, as I know it, doesn't really taste quite as good as the blue. Well, that's it. Went out for another day, down on the jetty early morning. The bent boat rods are going out again, and this is why I go marlin fishing. Just look at those boats just begging to take you fishing. On this particular day, I said to Nigel, it was our last day's fishing. I'd had blue marlin over 600 pounds on this particular trip. I said to Nigel, if the line goes in the next 30 or 40 minutes, you just take the strike. And here you go, talk about lucky. He got hooked up, and this tells you it's a big fish. Half a spool of 130 already gone. Now that, to me, is a lot of winding and a lot of effort. Obviously, we knew it was a good fish. It was early. I think it was about 9:30, quarter to 10 in the morning when this fish hooked up on one of the outrigger lures, one of the big Murray brothers, and he's actually got a bend in his heavy rod, but my God, he is really sweating there, hot in the sunshine. It's what blue marlin and black marlin fishing is all about, and this was a good fish.
Being the last day, I've given Nigel the strike, and he's lucky he's got one hooked up. It's quite a good fish, I would say. Now, as you know, we want to try and tag and release this fish. We don't know where it's hooked exactly, and we don't know what sort of size it is. We wanted to tag a real small one because it's easier to handle and get the hooks out. But we're going to see what it's like. We're going to take a shot at tagging it anyway, see if we can let it go. But obviously the crew don't appreciate anything like this for say get fish commission, but we're willing to pay the extra money to release this fish and let it go. So Nigel's down there struggling away, as you can see, and he's got about 3/4 of the spool filled up down there now, so he's working on it. Well, he's been going about half an hour on it now. Took it up on the blue and white lure, exactly the same lure as yesterday. I've already spoken to Flipper 7. Normal message was on there with Tony from Tony's Tackle at Eastbourne. I booked Flipper 7 for the last day, and I decided to let them have it. Not had a fish. He's already had a strike and lost a fish, didn't hook up. So we're all in the same area, both boats. So we're just hoping this one stays on long enough we can get into the boat, maybe show you some pictures, some boatside action. Got a real cool lot.
Now you're going to understand this fish we thought was about 200 pounds. It then went to about 300 pounds. I'm trying to tag it here, and in the split second that I want to tag it, the crewmen are screaming and shouting in Creole. I can't understand them, but they say it's a huge black marlin. Meanwhile, I've already planted the tag. In the next 2 seconds, the fish is gaffed. It's all over and done with, and the fish we were going to release that we thought was about 150, 180 pounds is a lot bigger, and we're going to take it in. As I say, I had no idea this was a black marlin. I knew it was a good fish. I put it up around perhaps 3. The skipper said no, a lot bigger. So Nigel's been lucky again. He's got a tremendous fish here, and unfortunately we couldn't tag it, but it's a tremendous fish. It's his biggest black marlin. So I think in fact it would have been my biggest black marlin had I not given the strike away, but boy, I'm a generous guy.
Black? It's a black.
You're okay.
Big black.
It's a black, is it?
Here you can see remora or suckerfish that attach themselves to the marlin, and this one actually got freedom.
Fish measured out over 11 feet 6 inches long from the bill right down to the fork of the tail, and you can see what he's done to that. Black marlin don't normally take lures, it's quite unusual. So this guy really caught us on the hop on the last day. Another lure, fortunately got 400-pound cable steel between the two hooks, so we weren't going to lose him. But what an end to a trip. We took 7 marlin. Nigel got the biggest black 477 pounds his fish turned away. And I managed the biggest blue myself out the whole trip was 647. So we've had a fantastic couple of fish in amongst 7 other marlins, some shark and some tuna. So indicates of fantastic fishing you can have in Mauritius. You notice the black marlin's pectoral fin doesn't fold down. Now this is what I didn't see in the water, and I couldn't see it. I thought the fish may be 300, but having given the strike away, that I wanted to tag and release it anyway. But in the excitement that ensues in marlin fishing, such is the level of excitement after hours of boring trolling doing nothing, that the fish is either gaffed or released in a matter of seconds. And here they release them, and unfortunately the captain and crew are a lot faster than me. Now just look at the size of this fish. It takes several men to haul it on a trolley. Up it goes to the weigh scales. It's a very happy guy with 477 pounds of black marlin hanging up there. No, big fish. Fantastic holidays anytime from October through to March.